There was a day when humanity was seconds away from disappearing. A single man, with a single decision, prevented the end of the world. But his story isn't in school books. He has no statues, no streets named after him. Today I'll tell you the story of the man who saved humanity, and no one knew it until many years later. It was a peaceful day, or so it seemed. The sun had risen as usual. The world's cities carried on with their routines, children at school, adults at work, planes taking off, trains moving, people dreaming. But beneath that normality, a silent tension lurked, a latent threat. The Cold War not only divided the world into two ideological blocks, it also kept the fingers of two superpowers millimeters away from a button capable of unleashing hell. The year was 1983. The world lived under the constant fear of nuclear war. Any mistake, any misunderstanding could be the last. And in the midst of that tension, one man received an alert, an alarm, a warning that said, the United States has launched missiles against the Soviet Union. The order was clear: respond, activate the counterattack, launch the immediate nuclear response. It was what protocol dictated. But something inside him told him no, that something wasn't right. And then he made a decision, one that would change the destiny of all human beings, one that you and I never knew happened until today. This is not a fictional story. It's absolutely real. And today, after decades in the shadows, you will meet him. His name was Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Army, a quiet, reserved, and meticulous man. His job was vital: to oversee the early warning system against nuclear missiles. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a supreme commander. He didn't have a red button on his desk. He had only one responsibility: to report if the radars detected a real attack, and to trust the technology or his instinct. On September 26, 1983, Petrov was on duty at the Serpukhov 15 base near Moscow. That night, everything changed. At 12:14 a.m., the alarm sounded. Soviet satellites reported that a missile had been launched from the United States. An intercontinental missile headed straight for the USSR. Petrov froze. Seconds later, a second alarm. Then a third, a fourth, a fifth. 5 missiles, all apparently launched from a base in the United States. Protocol dictated an immediate response. It was time to inform the Kremlin, to activate the counterattack, to launch Soviet missiles against North America. But Petrov hesitated. He thought. He reflected. Why would the United States send only 5 missiles? He wondered. If they're going to start a war, why wouldn't they launch hundreds at the same time? Something didn't add up. His instincts screamed that it was a false alarm. And instead of following protocol, Petrov made a decision that would distance him from procedure, from the manual, and perhaps from military logic. He decided not to report the attack. He called it a false alarm, and he didn't report it to the high command. If he had been wrong, the USSR would have been attacked, millions would have died, and he would be considered a traitor. But if he was right, he would save the world. The next few minutes were the longest of his life. He stared at the screens, the data. He waited for confirmation. Where were the impacts? Where was the explosion? Nothing happened. No missile, no war. The system was wrong. The alarm was false. The satellites had misinterpreted the sun's reflection on the high clouds. That had led to a misinterpretation. A simple natural phenomenon almost caused the apocalypse. Petrov was right. His decision had saved everything. But he wasn't decorated, or applauded, or even congratulated. In fact, he was interrogated, suspected, and then forgotten for years. His story was classified. His act of heroism silenced. He went into retirement, lived a humble life, and for decades, no one knew what he had done. No one imagined that humanity was seconds away from disappearing, and that it was a single man, with his intuition and courage, who prevented it. Pause a moment. Think about this. What would have happened if Petrov had obeyed protocol? What if he hadn't hesitated? The USSR would have launched its nuclear arsenal. The United States would have responded. Europe, too. The entire planet would have burned. Tens of millions dead in the first hour. Hundreds of millions in the days that followed. Nuclear winter would have covered the earth. Darkness, cold, hunger, total collapse. And all because of a reflection of the sun in the clouds, because of a false reading, because of blindly trusting a machine. That's why Petrov's story isn't just an anecdote. It's a warning, a lesson for all times. It's not just about the Cold War. It's about responsibility, about humanity, about the importance of having the courage to say no when everyone expects you to say yes. In the 2000s, his story finally became public. Documentaries, interviews, international awards. But by then, he was already old, tired, and marked by oblivion. Stanislav Petrov died in 2017 in a small apartment in Russia, alone, without military honors, without national recognition. But his legacy lives on, and it must be told, because his story reminds us of something fundamental. Technology can fail. Automated systems can make mistakes, but human judgment can save us. Today, more than ever, we live surrounded by artificial intelligence, algorithms, and automated decisions. But we still need brave people, people who think, who doubt, who aren't afraid to take responsibility. Petrov did it without knowing if he was right, without knowing if he would live to tell the tale. And thanks to that, we are here. This is not a war story. It's a peace story. A story of how a single human being in a room full of screens saved everyone else. Don't be fooled by the simplicity of the setting or the silence of the history books. Stanislav Petrov didn't need guns or speeches. He just needed courage and humanity. Today, more than ever, we need to remember that even in the most complex systems, the final say must be human. The final decision cannot rest in the hands of a machine, but in the conscience of someone willing to say, "This is not right." Thank you for listening to this story. If it moved you, share it. Let the world know that one day, one man saved the planet, and he did it without firing a single bullet.